I lifted up and I looked at my body, and there it was on the operating table. I just couldn't imagine these 7-foot light beings that were so full of healing power and potential. The one, that they were there for me. Two, that they were working through the neurosurgeons. And three, that they were healing me, that they were part of the healing. And then as I transitioned into that heavenly realm, I call it a heavenly realm, it was just perfect. No death, no darkness, just pure greenery, pure blue skies, just beautiful. My grandfather was there.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my guest, Tricia Barker. Hello, Tricia.
Hey, nice to be here.
It is wonderful to have you. I read your book years ago, and it was a wonderful book. And I know somebody else really loved it as well, because I only loan out the good ones. And I loaned it to somebody, and I was looking for it the other day, and I realized it was never returned. So I no longer have it, but that's always a good sign. It means that somebody else is really loving it too.
Oh, and I love it that you passed it along. I always like to think that people know each other well, and it's like, this book is right for you.
Yes, exactly. And that was before I was doing my podcast, and people would always come to me and ask for my books because I had all the great near-death experience books. But you have had an incredible near-death experience that you do share in your book, Angels in the OR. But for folks that want to hear it today, can you just start from the beginning and tell us what happened?
Yeah. I think these experiences are valuable because they change us so dramatically. And who I was before the accident was agnostic and a college student, and really kind of running away from religion, and running away from everything that wasn't focused on the material world. I grew up poor, wanted to be wealthy, and based on my skill set, I thought the best way to do this would be a lawyer. So I had a set idea of who I was and what I wanted to do, but I was also hurting a lot at that time. So, these one moment in time can shift everything. And this moment in time shifted the whole trajectory of my life. And what happened is I was on my way to run Austin 10K. And this was a symbol of like getting my life together, graduating, doing well. I had a full head-on collision. I mean, it was like almost a head-on collision, but slightly off, at 45 miles an hour and 65 miles an hour. I barely had time to put on the brake, and the other man didn't put on the brake. And so we hit each other going incredibly fast. He was in a SUV. I was in this little Honda hatchback. And I just remember the car crunching and my body crunching. And it was this terrible feeling of, immediately I knew I wasn't running the race, but I also began to think, ooh, this could get serious. I'm going to need an ambulance. I couldn't move. I couldn't reach the glove box. Things were intense. And I remember praying just a tiny little prayer. Just saw this bird fly across the sky and was like, oh God, it was a foxhole prayer though, nothing, major. I was like, if you're there, can you help me? This is really bad. Just thrown out there. The hospital was a mess. Like that whole scene was really long and drawn out. It took a long time for a neurosurgeon to take my case. I didn't have health insurance, and there were just complications because they didn't know how many internal injuries I had. And, you open someone up to do back surgery, but they might bleed to death, which is what happened to me. So they put the mask on and I was taken under. And I remember the next thing I knew, though, is I'd probably been under for surgery a long time, but I lifted up and I looked at my body, and there it was on the operating table. I was convinced. So all the agnostics out there in the world and the atheists who are like, that's not enough for me. I'm like, yeah, but I was in it. And I was formerly agnostic, and I was convinced that I was definitely seeing the doctors. This was not a dream. This was an added reality. I was clearer, sharper. Like my consciousness was uninhibited. I could just pick up on many new things all at once. I could take in the whole room, what the surgeons were doing. Then I looked up behind the surgeons and I saw the reality that changed everything. And that's why I named it the book, Angels in the OR, because that was the first bit of otherworldly scene that I saw, like seeing the surgeon operating on me in my own body. I was like, okay, understandable. But angels, what? Like I just couldn't imagine these 7-foot light beings that were so full of healing power and potential. The one, that they were there for me. Two, that they were working through the neurosurgeons, and three, that they were healing me, that they were part of the healing. It just blew my mind. I was like, are they available to us all? Are we missing out on something? Are they always with surgeons? When do they not? Are they just waiting for someone when they die and they take them on? So I had, all these questions just based on that, but I felt excited, like, oh, reality is no longer boring. At 22, I kind of felt like jaded, like a lot of people in Gen X, we did. It was just a thing. We just distrusted the government, distrusted corporations, distrusted everything, and felt like I know everything. Well, suddenly I didn't know everything. Suddenly I was very, very young on the spiritual journey and amazed. And as I was in that scene, the monitor flatlined, and that's when I realized, oh yeah, I'm technically dead at this point. And with that time, I wanted to experience more, so I left the hospital room, saw my stepdad getting a candy bar out of the vending machine, and got like a little glimpse of him, which became a verifiable detail later. But what was important to me was saying goodbye to everyone. So I really just felt my soul say, I love you, goodbye, to everyone I had ever known. And then I just started to merge with people I didn't know, people I just passed on the sidewalk, everyone in the town of Austin. I just kind of felt this, okay, we're one for a minute. And then I transitioned into this night sky, and then something very, very far away in the stars. All I know is just a split second, but then I was somewhere different with no fear. And I felt that light of God coming toward me, and it felt peaceful. I felt comforted, and I heard certain messages that seem very simple, but translatable, I think, to most religions, is love is all that matters and all that you take with you when you go. This idea that you're going to travel light. All that your soul can carry is the lightest of the experiences and your choices. But at the same time, it's almost like even though you leave all that, the other stuff behind, there was a life review. And sometimes people fear the life reviews. They think it is something incredibly judgmental, and they're going to be, just flogged for everything they did wrong. It's more like when you're at graduate school or high level education, where you're just kind of debating, almost like philosophy. Well, what would have been better there? Do you think it would have been for your soul's higher purpose to have chosen this? And a lot of times, you just kind of know. So the very thing that I saw since I was so young, at 22, I was cliquish, and, my clique was the college group of kids who were a little bit alternative. And so anyone who was not like us, who didn't like live music or Doc Martens or, just very silly stuff, they weren't in my clique, or I didn't feel the need to talk to them, at work and other places. And I saw the nicest couple that actually prayed for me, and they were about 30 when I was 22. But to me, that was so old, like when I was 22. And I just thought, oh, these people who haven't been to college, are professional waiters and waitresses. And I looked down my nose at them to some degree, and they went home and prayed for me. And I thought, oh, I'm embarrassed. Like there I am in heaven going, I do want to go back. I'm going to do that so much better. I'm really going to like people. I promise. I'm going to love everyone. I may not like everyone. I'm going to love everyone. And I promise. And so I just kind of felt some humor in that moment, but also compassion. But it's like your soul in that expanded state knows it can do better. And I think that's why we keep reincarnating. I think that's why, people always say, why did you sign up for this? your soul, it's like the Olympics down here. We're just trying to get a little bit better at being kinder and being more loving to others. And that's what that moment taught me. And then as I transitioned into that heavenly realm, I call it a heavenly realm, it was just perfect. No death, no darkness, just pure greenery, pure blue skies, just beautiful. My grandfather was there, and he also looked young. He was not the leukemia ridden, older man that I had waved goodbye to on his last day on earth. He was vibrant and beautiful and full of love. And he always represented love to me. He was always talking about my future. He had this way of being a really good grandfather. And always knowing perhaps that he didn't have a long life. And I think he wanted me to have a connection to him in the spirit world if possible. And so I definitely did in that place. He asked me if I wanted to continue on. I just rushed toward that light of God, felt my family's prayers trying to pull me back. And people always ask about prayers. All it is love. If you have a loved one who's dying and you want to say goodbye to them, just send your love in a prayer and they will feel every bit of it. I know that because I could feel the words, I could feel the emotion. I knew exactly what people were saying. And then as I flew toward that light of God, I felt so much better. Oh, there is no drug. There is no feeling, nothing like that love of God. And having grown up experiencing some neglect and a lot of emotional and physical abuse, I really needed that love of God. I mean, like, I could have stayed there forever, and I kind of realized that. I was like, I don't need to go back. That's a really tough place down there. I think I'll just stay here because I've never felt this good. I've always felt a little uncomfortable here in the body. There's no reason to return. I'll stay. And at that moment, God was like, no, look down. And I saw all these souls along a river, and some souls had light and some souls had darkness around them. And it looked just really simple, almost like a children's book. It's either fear or love, and that was the only message, that people are either living in fear or they're living in a love for anything. And they don't even have to be spiritual is the weird thing. Like, they could be totally atheist, but like in love with their job and their family, and they are going to, find a cure to diabetes, my God. And they are, like, they're just in love with life. So whatever it is that is your highest calling, your highest good, it inadvertently connects you to God, your angels, everything, even if you don't even know it, even if you don't even care. So you're either connecting to the light of love and love for all that is, or love for something that is, like just going in the direction of love, or you're going in the direction of fear. And, I was sent back to work with students, and that's evolved into working with more people as time has gone on. But there's a lot to the story. That's the near-death experience story itself. I remembered everything. So for the most part, there's some kind of downloads that, came later, but I knew what had happened to me when I woke up. And so I was strong-willed enough to not let anyone tell me no, like this didn't happen.
Which is very important. The fact that you didn't doubt what happened to you, and you knew it was definitely real, what you had gone through.
Yeah. I hear some people doubting it or listening to people, and not for a second, because I was hardcore agnostic, borderline atheist. And, I really, when I experienced this, I knew I'd never be the same. It was kind of like the dial had shifted. I could see things differently. I could hear things differently. I was very psychic almost immediately, which is weird. Some of that's toned down. I think empaths have to tone some of that down. But it was like, even with the morphine running through my body, I was on a different wavelength, just way different. And I think it was the after effects too. Like, you can tell someone that's a dream, but if they become this totally different person, well, how do you explain that?
And that is what convinces me when I interview people like you. I mean, all of you have changed so dramatically. And I was telling you earlier that, whenever I meet my guests, you guys are all so loving and wonderful. And when we have technical issues, you're like calm and cool with it. And I just think it's such a reflection on what you did experience on the other side or wherever that place was.
Yeah, yeah. Even if I'd not had the near death experience, I think people who just have an accident have a great appreciation for life. Having the near death experience rips aside a fear of death and it gives you a deep appreciation for life. So it's like I felt like 100 years old and 22, at the same time. I felt like I'd already reached the end of my life and already transitioned and came back and got to redo. Like it's kind of the way it felt. And I felt like that, you know, a 22-year-old who listens to like some guru talk, might not understand that much of it. I swear I could pick up spiritual books after that NDE. And I'm not saying I lived like a guru, but I certainly understood the metaphysics. Like I was just like different brain at that point. I was like, of course.
It would be so nice to have the wisdom of a 100-year-old, but to have just that youthful, healthy body and that we have when we're in our early 20s. That would be great. Tricia, I've got a lot of questions about your experience, and I want to kind of go through a few of them. One thing with the angels that you saw, one thing that was neat that you mentioned in your book is that the angels actually worked through the neurosurgeons. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so the healing light that the angels were sending, and it was so bright. It came from their eyes and it also seemed to emanate from their hands. And so they were sending it through the back of the surgeons and it was coming out through the surgeon's hands. So it was assisting, they were adding healing to the work they were doing. But then it also enveloped my spine and my whole body. And it was like they were sending intelligence as light. So they were sending and I remember seeing like one light thought and it was like, hey, there's a bone fragment over here, kind of pointing the surgeon to pick that one off. And telling me at the same time, look, we're going to pick all of these off. We're going to make sure that they are so that you can run and walk. And so I knew that I'd had that information before returning that I would run again because I was worried, like how much of a disability it would be in the future. And
when you saw the angels, you said you had a bunch of questions like, does everybody have angels? Can we call upon angels? What were some of the answers that you got?
I had to wait until after the NDE. I didn't get, answers directly in the NDE, but about a year and a half later, when I'm back at school, I start thinking about them and the answers come, more frequently. But a friend of mine asked me, and I think I put this in the book, and he was like, do you ever see angels now? And I felt really mad. I was like, oh, I don't. And I put my head down and I was like trying to see them energetically. And then I opened my eyes and I saw them everywhere, behind people, just like everywhere. And I was like, well, we do have to, because and then I saw the weirdest thing, some discarnate beings like ghosts. And I was like, okay, so ghosts are real too. This is a real thing. Some people are just walking around. And so, in that moment, I'm grateful for those moments of seeing. And I understand why people would lose their minds if they went around, seeing to this degree.
Yes.
It's a lot,
It is it would be a lot for sure. Many people say, okay, well, your angels helped you, but that's because you're special or that's because you had a near-death experience. Can we expect them to help us in our everyday life?
Yeah, and I do hear that question. I hear a couple of different questions around that, but yes. So ask them for very specific things, not necessarily parking spots, but more like energetic. They're very good at sending love and sending information. So say you have a new diagnosis and you're taking a new supplement, have the angels like send light before you take that supplement, to really help you. Or if you're working with a healer or therapist, ask them to work through that person, a chiropractor to work through that person to help you, because you need that, or to work through you to help others. And so that can always be a prayer that is given. And they seem to want to do that. They want to work through us, they want to work through others, and they do want to add energy of healing to various things. There's more that they do, but I think they quell our fears too. So if you're and everyone's dealing with anxiety these days, this is just a quick tip. Whatever it is, ask your angels. You're driving, you're anxious, ask them to protect your car. You're giving a presentation, ask them to be around you as you give a presentation. Whatever it is, just ask them to be with you. And even if you're fearing big calamities in the world, ask them to move humanity towards the highest timeline, and to assist you in helping people move towards the highest timeline. Because showing up as your best self, no matter what's happening in the world, is always going to be better than showing up as your most anxious, terrified self.
And somebody is saying, well, is it really going to work if I do that?
This is what I've told very young people. A lot of people are always going to doubt. And you could doubt for 5 years. And then if something shifts, would you believe, or would you just think it was going to shift anyway? I think what takes away doubt is love. And when you feel that love, like that's what I couldn't deny ever, was that love of God, no matter how hard it's been being back here on earth, and so many times I don't even want to be here. I could never forget or deny how much I'm loved, and everyone is. It's not just me in particular, it's everyone. And if we all knew that, if we all knew how deeply we're loved, I think it would change us. I think it would change how we interact. I think it would. It would just give us all a lot more peace.
One thing that also gave you a renewed perspective was your life review. Can you step us through that?
Yeah, so there were a few things I left out. There were some moments that were considered great, that were considered just beautiful. So there was a moment in childhood where I questioned God at about 5, and I said, "Hey, God, I'm going to go meditate, pray." I don't know if I do meditate, but I certainly was in like that lotus position in a briar patch. And I closed my eyes and I was praying, and I was like, if you're a real God, I want some rabbits to come and play around me. And so I knew there were rabbits in that bush. A mother and her little baby rabbits all came around me very close, and it was the cutest thing to see. And I was like, well, thank you, God. And then what I saw in that life review is that that's okay. It's okay to play with God. It's okay to play with consciousness. It's okay to do that. That God kind of liked it. It was like reaching out your finger, almost like art, to touch God. And that God said, that's good. You are communing with me, and through nature, that it's easy to get signs through nature. And then another moment I saw in life that was good was really just being joyful. And for me, this was connected to nature, but playing with nature, playing with animals. That one of the messages was remind them to go back to nature, for healing, for joy, for all kind of things. And that seemed to be like a reminder of how much joy so many of us, I think, had in childhood because of nature. And if we go back to that, we do recapture some of our essential joy. And then the no judgment, or at least, keep an open mind with people before they prove you, to who they are. Like it's not that you don't judge at all, but you certainly don't prejudge based on how people look. That's ridiculous. Give them a chance, get to know them. What are their hearts? And really the message was God looks into the heart of people, not into the actions or who they are. And to me, that meant, like, you could be a monk and be a great monk, or a really mean, evil monk. You could be a priest or a minister and be a very loving priest or minister, or be a really awful person, with an awful heart. And that it doesn't matter, what you're doing outwardly for God. It's really like what's inward.
That is so true because I have people make comments in the comment section, and it surprises me sometimes when somebody in the name of their religion, whatever it is, come across very cruel sometimes. And then, of course, others say the same thing, but very kindly. And it does really open your eyes to you've got to actually live with that love. And in fact, you made a really interesting point when you were talking about you could be an atheist, but you could still live with love. And it sounds like that is also serving.
Yeah, that if you're following your highest calling, and if that atheist, if his or her highest calling was to just end diabetes 1 and 2, and just, wanted to throw themselves into that research and just felt energized by it most of the days of their life. Like, where do you think that energy and that joy is coming from? They're doing what they're meant to do, and God is assisting in some way. Like, I think, God's love isn't so exclusive. Like, oh no, I'm only giving it to the Methodists over here and the Lutherans here and a few of the mega churches here. Like God's love is like it's confetti. It's just thrown up. Anyone who wants it, just go get it. It's like it is like sunlight. Go stand in it. Like that's what the love of God is like. And yeah, so it's not commodified. We want to commodify so much, and it can't be. And I think near death experiencers are beginning to talk back to a lot of people who are religious. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I have, yes.
And there is, almost a warning, I think, at this point. And that warning is like, didn't Jesus say that the people who were so concerned with religion and the rules and condemning everyone would be the ones the farthest away from him? And isn't that how it ends? And isn't that exactly how so many people in the church are being, is not being that love of Jesus, which is so inclusive, and which is, I care about the kid on the street as much as I care about, the kid in private school. I care about, every human being is worthy and worthy of concern. And I think we've just kind of gotten away from just loving all people.
And then there's somebody like Howard Storm who said, when he asked Jesus, what's the best religion? And Jesus said, whatever religion brings you closest to God.
Yeah, that whatever makes you more loving to yourself, your family members, the people you interact with daily, and the world in general. I mean, you can look at, your sphere of influence as, just where you begin to do the work. And we all have to do that work. And it's challenging, but it's beautiful to really examine. And this is a hard one, where you're not feeling worthy of love yourself. And I think we all feel that, because if I say like, oh, the love of God's out there, we can all just go accept it like a waterfall, so many people are going to be yelling at me, I still feel like crap. This isn't working. Well, those are the places where you're blocked, where you've heard so many times in your family or in your past, or, just even unconsciously at some genetic level or soul level, something is holding you back from receiving what you want. And so one of the things that I learned with the near-death experience is the body itself carries memories and holds on to pain. And even though my soul was completely purified over there, and I came back with a lot of that understanding, the body still had a lot of trauma to release. And even the trauma of the near-death experience then, added trauma. And so, life has become kind of a releasing of stuff and a deepening of my understanding of healing and working with those angels with my own physical pain and trying to share that with people too. So to come back around to your other question, I think, You can use angels with your own physical pain, and they can show you at times when it's safe to shift out of it, at times when you need to go in a different direction and receive healing with different modalities.
Well, this time has gone by so quickly with this episode, and I have so many more questions, but let's go ahead and take that into part 2. I really enjoyed talking to Tricia, and I hope you did too. I read her book years ago and I loved it, and it was great to just meet her in person and to be able to ask her questions. It was fun to hear some of the things she mentioned. I don't know about you, but when she talked about the bunnies in the life review, I thought, okay, I would have asked for the bunnies. And then when they came, I would have said, okay, now I need some more bunnies to prove that that was actually a sign. And then I probably would have asked for a third set. So that kind of triggered that in my brain. Uh, I love how she talked about living with love. She and so many near-death experiencers talk about how important that is. I love that. And they truly are wonderful people. I mean, people that have had these experiences do really transform. And to me, that's one of the things that convinces me that these are real, that they've had a genuine experience. And we actually did have technical issues at the beginning of this podcast. And she was so easygoing about it, no big deal. And that has been the case anytime I've had a technical issue. These folks really, they do walk their talk, and I so appreciate that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything that we talked about. You can leave them in the comments. You also could just write "made it" if you prefer. I always enjoy that too. And then for those of you that liked it, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, I sure hope you will. And always remember that you can find all of my episodes from the very oldest to the newest in my playlist. And I always have a link to that in the description. So now what's coming up in part 2? Well, we do cover a lot of things, and maybe the easiest way to show you that is to just take a listen. Any thoughts on why some people see light and some people will see Jesus or a religious figure? Have you had any revelations of what people would consider a hellish experience? Your intuition, I heard you say that you can sometimes feel in advance when there's some sort of a societal upheaval. And I have had other near-death experiencers say, we're kind of headed into some rocky times, and we're getting kind of the point where it's past being able to change some of that. Do you have any kind of a sense of that? That and so much more coming up. I sure hope you'll join us, and thank you everybody for joining me today. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.